Welcome to Press Review with me, Carmen Cracknell. Today we're joined by political analyst Hassan AlKatib as we discuss the ongoing Syrian refugee crisis and debates about Geneva II. We will also take a look at the assassination of Lebanon's former finance minister, Mohammad Chatah. But first, let's review today's UK front pages. The Independent leads its front page reporting on new government plans which will require patients admitted to hospital in an emergency to prove they are not migrants or be charged for life-saving treatments. The paper also reports that more than 100 secret documents detailing discussions between Tony Blair, Gordon Brown and George Bush in the run-up to the Iraq War are to be published in the new year, and features a picture of Volgograd railway station in southern Russia after a suspected suicide bombing. The Guardian leads its front page reporting on the head of the CBI telling employees that companies benefiting from the economic recovery must pay their long-suffering workers more next year. It also takes a look at the Labour Party, which is set to pursue the policy of universal childcare for all preschool children in the run-up to the general election, and features a picture of Formula One's Michael Schumacher, who is in critical condition after sustaining head injuries in a skiing accident. The Daily Telegraph leads its front page reporting that migrants are given free access to our GPs as the government gets set to introduce plans for paying for NHS. The paper also reports on Formula One's Michael Schumacher's accident and reports on UKIP's Nigel Farage saying that Britain should accept refugees fleeing Syria. The Times leads its front page also reporting on government's plans for non-EU migrants to pay for the NHS, with an advisor to Romania's Prime Minister saying that Britain should be far more concerned about bankers taking billions of pounds than Roma begging for coins on the streets. Like many other papers today, the paper also features a picture of Schumacher, who is fighting for his life after a skiing accident in the French Alps. Now let's take a look at the top stories in the Middle East. As the Syria refugee crisis intensifies and negotiations for Geneva II continue, let's see what opinions are given in the papers. The Syria Times features an opinion piece by Dr. Mohammed Ibrahim titled "Wahhabi Devils." The author writes, "Geneva II is a failure if Saudi Arabia, the main sponsor of the Wahhabi al-Qaeda affiliated terrorists slaughtering the Syrians, is to participate. Geneva II should be to combat terrorism, and so Saudi Arabia shouldn't attend before committing itself to refrain from mushrooming, financing, training and from dispatching terrorists to Syria." Regarding the approaching Geneva II, the author adds, "The Wahhabi al-Saud are accustomed to setting the situation more ablaze on the ground once an opportunity for a political solution would become closer." Speaking of Iranian participation, the author added, "The Iranians, true friends of Syria, should participate because they are helping the Syrians to withstand the aggression of terrorists of more than 83 countries against Syria." Al-Ibrahim concluded, "We are secular and refuse to be Wahhabis. The Syrians are indeed heroes, indivisible, courageous and invincible. We are committed to defending our past, present and future against the Wahhabi Takfiris." The Guardian features an article by Nicholas Watt titled "UKIP's Nigel Farage shocks own party with call to let in Syrian refugees," saying that the government has rejected a call by Farage for Britain to honour the spirit of a 1951 UN convention and allow Syrian refugees into the country. The author called it an unlikely reversal of roles between the UKIP leader and the government, which has no plans to accept Syrian refugees and would instead focus its efforts on providing humanitarian aid. In a statement to the BBC, Farage said, "I think refugees are a very different thing to economic migration, and I think this country should honour the spirit of the 1951 Declaration on Refugee Status. I think actually there is a responsibility on all of us in the Free West to try and help some of those people in Syria fleeing in fear of their lives." Watt writes Farage made his call days after David Cameron joined forces with Ed Miliband and Nick Clegg to endorse a £4 billion UN appeal after a warning that nearly 3/4 of the Syrian population would need help in 2014. The article added that the government would focus its efforts on providing humanitarian help to Syrian refugees in the region. A spokesperson said, "We are one of the highest international donors to the Syrian relief effort. The £500 million pledged so far is more than any other EU member state." The article concluded with a remark from Antonio Guterres, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, who told The Guardian, "Western countries such as Britain and the US may be asked to accept tens of thousands of refugees." He said, "We would like, when the time comes, to be able to launch a resettlement programme as massive as the one for Iraqis." The New Statesman features an opinion piece by Jim Murphy MP titled "Syrians Cannot Afford for Next Year to Be Like This Year," in which he argues more can and must be done to alleviate Syrian suffering. Murphy writes, "For the people of Syria, 2013 has been a dreadful year. Chemical weapons, summary executions, rape, torture, kidnappings and polio, death and disease on an unimaginable scale, the worst refugee crisis since Rwanda, the most sustained assault on human rights since the wars in the Balkans. Evidence has even emerged of snipers targeting children and the summary execution of children as young as 1. Whilst the humanitarian crisis deepens, some have lost their humanity." Murphy adds, "Only a political solution can stop the fighting, but effective aid can alleviate the suffering. More than 2 million refugees have already fled to neighbouring countries. For countries like Jordan, Turkey, Iraq and Lebanon, that is no light burden." Speaking about the shocking re-emergence of polio in Syria, Murphy writes, "We have all been horrified by the re-emergence of polio in Syria 14 years after the country had eradicated this disease. This is a country that neighbours Europe. Polio has re-emerged on our doorstep." Regarding UK aid to Syria, Murphy writes, "The UK has already spent more than £500 million supporting those affected by this conflict and will rightly spend more before this crisis is over. But at the moment, 3 big things are holding us back." He identifies the 3 issues hampering aid to Syria. He writes, "First, the UN appeal is still woefully underfunded. As always, the UK is doing our bit, but other prosperous nations have got to put their hands in their pockets too. In September, Oxfam produced evidence which suggests France, Qatar and Russia are all giving less than half of their fair share." He adds, "Second, we have got to make sure that humanitarian relief is getting through beyond Damascus and across the whole country. People are dying from easily preventable and treatable diseases because they are simply out of reach." Murphy concludes, "We have got to do more to protect the right to an education for Syrian children. 1 in 5 Syrian schools have been destroyed and hundreds of thousands of refugees have now been left with no proper schooling at all. A generation of Syrian children without education would be a disaster for them, for their country, for the Middle East and for the international community as a whole." Joining us on the show today is political analyst Hassan AlKatib. Thank you for joining us, Hassan.
Thank you.
Britain seems divided on the issue of whether to accept more Syrian refugees. Do you think the government will reverse its decision to accept no more refugees?
Well, of course, Britain has made a stance at the moment where they are not accepting refugees and they think aid is going to be the answer. There's been a lot of criticism in the UK about this particular decision. Obviously, this was a coalition decision by the Liberal Democrats and the Tory government. And even within the Liberal Democrats, people like Sir Mingus Campbell, who is a former Liberal Democrat leader, has criticised this decision, and he said it was unfortunate that Britain is not accepting or not allowing Syrian refugees inside the country. So, in a sense, there's a lot of criticism around this particular decision made by the UK. A lot of people feel that at the moment the Syrian refugees are facing huge troubles. The situation in these refugee camps are completely terrible, horrible, and no matter how much money you give in aid, no matter how many blankets you give or food, it's not going to stop the dire humanitarian circumstances that these people are living in. So I think if you like, the solution to try and ease the suffering, trying to ease the problems that the Syrian refugees are facing, is to allow them in, to give them relief, to bring them into the country, and that way, it will be a big solution and something which will, give a lot of relief to these people.
And so the government believes that aid is more effective than accepting refugees, and that's not your opinion?
No, because of course, even other European countries have started to accept the Syrian refugees. Even America has, although the numbers are very small. They say around a few thousand Syrian refugees have entered European countries. Even Bulgaria have accepted probably up to 6,500, and Bulgaria is obviously a poor European country, and their economy is being strained because of the very Syrian refugees in their own country. So this is something which I think a lot of countries have identified as a right. It's in the UN Convention to allow such refugees inside a country when there's a lot of war, and especially the UK does know this, that the war is not going to end anytime soon. It will last for many months, if not many years. So in such a situation, the best thing to do, like we did to, for instance, the people in Kosovo, the people in Bosnia, people in other countries in North Africa and the Middle East, the UK accepted refugees because of the situation was deteriorating in their countries, because of ongoing conflict and people not knowing when it was going to end. And the same thing is happening in Syria, and the solution isn't going to come anytime soon. The refugees are going to stay in the camps for many months, and if not many years. It's a huge humanitarian crisis, one of the worst we've seen over the past few years. And the logical thing to do is obviously to accept refugees in the country.
Yeah, and on a slightly different issue, speculation is ongoing about the participants in Geneva too. At this stage, do you think the conference has the potential to reach a political solution?
Well, I think at this moment in time, it's going to be pretty much guesswork at the moment as to whether a real political solution is going to be put down on the table where all sides are pretty much going to be agreeing with. Even within the Syrian opposition, there are voices who are saying, look, let's just accept Assad's going to be in power. We just have come up with a solution, because if the situation, of course, is getting worse, and it's going to continue getting worse, and there's no other way of fighting the government. So, but there's others who, like Saudi Arabia and other countries, who are obviously not very happy with what's happening. France as well is trying to cooperate with Saudi Arabia as much as possible, and they've signalled their unease with, of course, Israel as well. They've signalled their unease with the way I think the talks are going with America and Russia over this particular situation. So there's still a lot needs to be cleared in the next month after Geneva, but a real political solution may not work, may work, we still don't know, and I think there's going to be a lot of more negotiations in the future, because I think there's a lot at stake at the moment. Even America, for instance, I think they have many plans for the future of the Middle East. They've also, redrawn the maps, and they've even to the GCC countries, the Gulf countries, they are thinking of making them into one big country, one bloc. But that's something which the smaller countries like Qatar and Emirates and Oman has actually said that they did not want this to go ahead, and they said this will only give more power to Saudi Arabia, something which America is looking to try and cement a powerful ally inside the region, because they're seeing Iran stronger, and now with their other allies such as Russia and China. So it's going to be a very next year, 2014, is going to be a very interesting year, but we're probably going to see more gains from Russia and Iran on this particular issue, and of course for the Syrian government.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us, Hassan.
Thank you.
That was political analyst Hassan AlKatib on the line. Now let's continue with our coverage of the Middle East. As Lebanon's President Michel Suleiman announces a $3 billion grant from Saudi Arabia to bolster the country's army, let's take a look at what analysts are saying on the assassination of Lebanon's former finance minister, Mohammad Chatah. Writing for Al Monitor, Clovis Maqsood says that after the assassination of Lebanon's former finance minister, efforts must be made to protect Lebanon from further sectarian breakdown. In his article, Chatah assassination marks dangerous escalation. Maqsood says the December 27th assassination of Ambassador Mohammad Chatah constitutes a serious escalation of dangerous tensions in Lebanon. Amid a resigned government, a dysfunctional parliament, an ongoing flow of Syrian refugees, periodic bombings, kidnappings and sectarian conflicts, Lebanon is vulnerable and will continue to be so as long as the Syrian crisis is not resolved during the forthcoming Geneva II conference. He adds that with the growing sectarian polarization occurring among Lebanon's neighbours Syria and Iraq and the Palestinian question still unsolved, it is imperative to focus on Lebanon and its future once again. Maqsood believes that efforts must be intensified to shield Lebanon from further breakdowns and escalating sectarian divisions. While civil society and professional unions remain unaffected by the sectarian divide, it is hoped that this constitutes an opportunity for them to intervene, emboldened by their moral authority and potential roles as catalysts. He continues that we cannot underestimate at this moment the gravity of the situation in Lebanon. Its unity and stability would in turn be a contribution to efforts that aim to resolve many of the region's serious problems. Then Lebanon will hopefully resume its well-known moral and intellectual contributions throughout the Arab patrimony. Lebanon's Daily Star has an editorial piece looking into the effects of the assassination on Lebanon's society in its article Collateral Damage. The article says politicians in Lebanon are well aware of the precarious security situation and the threats to their lives daily, which was brought into dramatic focus with Friday's assassination of former Minister Mohammad Chatah. Although special precautions are taken against such terror attacks, these measures can't provide total protection from harm, as Chatah's killing proved. But other people perished in Friday's car bombing in downtown Beirut: Chatah's bodyguard Tarek Badr and 6 innocent bystanders. The article takes a look at one of the 6 killed, named Mohammad Chatah, a 16-year-old whose photographs before and after the blast were circulated widely on social media. It says Chatah represents the ordinary people from across the political and sectarian divide who continue to pay the ultimate price for merely residing here. They're the people who wake up every morning and leave for school or work or for a bit of socialising with friends without being certain if they'll return home at the end of the day. It adds that government officials and politicians issue worthless statements about the security situation, claiming things are under control. On other occasions, they just shrug and lamely ask, "What can we do?" The article continues saying the Lebanese are sick and tired of all these worthless words and want to get on with their lives. They have been promised that efforts are being made to improve the economic situation, defend national sovereignty, or lure tourists somehow to the country. These are all luxury items in the context of the current situation because the authorities are unable to stop people from becoming mere collateral damage. It adds that if Lebanon's leaders can't stop citizens from becoming collateral damage, they are telling people, if you're rich enough, send your children away because we can't guarantee their security, and if you lack these resources, take whatever job opportunity you can get abroad, no matter how menial, because you're on your own. The article concludes that ordinary people who obey the law, play by the rules and hope for a better life have no prospects. With every passing day, Lebanon is being emptied of its most valuable resources. The only future may be one where the thugs call the shots. Ibrahim Al-Amin writes for Al-Akhbar, asking Chatah assassination, who will benefit from the accusations? Al-Amin says no one needs to explain to people that the Future Movement and March 14th are accusing Hezbollah of being behind the assassination of former Minister Mohammad Chatah. Their logic is based on a political or maybe non-political conviction. He adds that March 14th has reached the same conclusion. On every occasion, the killer continues to spill blood and lose. For the past 9 years at least, the same group of people who have been accusing Hezbollah and the Lebanese Syrian security regime of being behind the series of political assassinations in Lebanon, which mostly targeted March 14th figures. Al-Amin says that in many cases it's understandable that anger, tension and hatred could lead to political accusations or even fabrications against an opponent. But in our case, we might need to ask questions that are naive or spiteful. Al-Amin asks a series of questions such as, did the outcome of those assassinations benefit Hezbollah as a resistance movement, a political group, or a side that is the centre of polarisation for Arab Shia? And if the party was professional to the extent of doing all that its opponents say, why does it not choose a more representative personality from the opposition? He says that there are other calculations based on facts and information saying that Lebanon is heading towards more madness and more blood, and as usual, Lebanon becomes big enough for an international congregation of assassins. He concludes that it is clear that such a discussion does not have a middle ground in the midst of political and security madness. It's even more clear that March 14th wants to keep on dancing over the blood, exploiting it here or there. And it is more than clear that someone wants to push Lebanon into a more cruel situation in the international war in the region, especially in Syria. However, they only aim for reaction, strife and madness. In this case, how could one take a step backward to look at the whole picture while the only thing we see is a country by name only? Now let's take a look at the top headlines from international papers. UAE's Gulf News leads its front page with the headline, Khalifa Sat will launch Arabs into space era, Mohammed, as UAE gears up for a historic blast-off into orbit in 2017. The International New York Times leads its front page with the headline, Computers that learn from experience, as it says computers have entered an age where they can learn from their own mistakes. China's Global Times leads its front page with the headline, Hunan lawmakers probed. Iran's Tehran Times leads its front page with the headline, Iran's new centrifuges not operational, Salehi. For more updates, please visit levant.tv. We'll be back tomorrow with another press review. Until then, it's goodbye from me.